Fire engulf all.
Alexa, ligar o ventilador.
Welcome to hell. I get 30, 35, sold it, $30. You bought it. Buyer number is 1909, number 1909. Fire engulf all. Welcome to hell.
What's up, people? Hope you guys are having a beautiful weekend so far. What's up, Yessie? What's up, Blue Rope Guy? What's up, Zombie? What's up, people? Hope you guys are ready for a wild ride. Like I said, let me know if my audio is a bit fucked or if anything's wrong. Last time, the background audio was way too loud and I was way too low. But that's the cost of getting fucked up watching this goofy shit. So, you know, happens. So I lowered the the circus music and I went way up on my mic. So yeah. So yeah, disclaimer again, I'm not judging anybody, I'm not trying to offend anyone. If you believe in that shit, good for you. This is satirical, this is comedy. We're just having fun here. So, you know, don't take it like a dick, don't take it so hard. This one looks wild. We're gonna learn about the story of Nibiru, which is either a planet or a spaceship. I'm not too sure yet. Be on the lookout. I'm gonna be covering a whole lot more of those videos. There's one about energy equals money. I'm very curious about that one. It should be coming soon. So yeah. Yeah, so let's get started. And if you know, as usual, if you make N towers, you hit the goal. The person who makes the most successful N towers wins, I don't know, something. We'll figure it out. Let's get it started.
Hello there. Welcome to Nibiru, the movie. What you're about to see is a fusion of the first 3 parts of the Sumerian epic, with a few extra minutes of never-before-seen footage as well. While the Sumerian epic is not finished, this collection here serves as a foundation for everything that follows, and we felt that putting it together in this movie would make it easier to take in the story and theories without having to go through multiple videos. As a final note, this entire video you're about to watch was actually made by a very small team, and we're working hard to continue making lots more like this for you to enjoy. So if you like this video and you want
to credit where credit's due, some of the animation is pretty dope. Like the planet exploding was pretty fucking dope. It's still goofy shit, but you know, had to, you know, put a little positive in there.
Bring some fresh, loving energy into your life, please head over to our spirit shop and check out Patch Tarot, the Book of Patch, and the Book of Spirit. We've got some other really cool stuff on there too.
Oh yeah, by the way, whatever believes these things are, it's very much like a cult or religion or sect, or call it whatever you want. But yeah, they're full on organized. There's merch, there's websites, you can buy the t-shirts and the book and the Bible and the posters. So I don't know, be careful guys. It's all fun and games until you're in the woods stacking guns and drinking the Kool-Aid. So
made by us. Our goal is to build a team that allows us to continue making these kind of videos non-stop. And it's thanks to your amazing support that we're able to share this with you now. So thank you again so much, and please have a beautiful experience watching Nibiru, the secret origins of our world. In order to talk about the nature of the universe, and to discuss questions such as whether it has a beginning or an end, you have to be clear about what a scientific theory is. I shall take the simple-minded view that a theory is just a model of the universe, or a restricted part of it, and a set of rules that relate quantities in the model to observations that we make. It exists only in our minds and does not have any other reality, whatever that might mean. A theory is a good theory if it satisfies two requirements. It must accurately describe a large class of observations on the basis of a model that contains only a few arbitrary elements, and it must make definite predictions about the results of future observations. When the late Professor Stephen Hawking wrote that, of course he is referring to a scientific theory which pertains to the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, or any other natural process of the universe. A historical theory, on the other hand, is defined as a concept with several uses. Often, researchers will provide a theory about historical events and connections, an orderly preconceived impression of the phenomenon to be studied. Used in this way, theory means the same as hypothesis. So what you are about to witness is just that, a historical theory, a hypothesis about the way in which human history...
I'm not sure about that one. I don't know about you guys in chat, but as an actual scientific theory based on quantum physics versus an hypothesis about history is not really the same. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm nerding out. It's just, it's not. No. Just no.
May have unfolded. It's a theory about where we've come from, and even where we might go. This information does not just come unjustified and out of nowhere, but is based on countless hours of research, translation, interpretation, and discussion among historians, archaeologists, linguists, anthropologists, and even planetary scientists. We'll be referencing scientific articles and discoveries throughout this feature, which will be sourced on screen at the moment of the claim, with a little one of these.
What?
We've also put a link to all of our sources in the author comments, as well as in the end credits, just in case you missed them. As Professor Hawking wrote, this theory we are presenting ultimately exists entirely within our minds. What we do with this theory, with these ideas, the information, the story, is entirely up to each of us individually. Take it with a grain of Himalayan rock salt, or a dash of pepper if you prefer. Just remember, have your own experience, and make it a great one.
Here we go. Get ready for some astral projections, motherfucker.
The year is 1847. A young archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard was Indiana Jonesing his way around ancient Mesopotamian ruins, where he properly identified and henceforth discovered the ancient Assyrian city-state of Nineveh in an area now known as Iraq. In an absolutely incredible discovery, he found 22,000 clay tablets hidden in the depths of the city. These tablets contained cuneiform, which today is one of, if not the earliest known writing systems known to man, created by the Sumerians 6,000 years ago. Over the years, more ancient historical cities were found and excavated. Many of the world's museums now count among their prize exhibits the ceremonial gates, winged bulls, chariots, tools, utensils, jewelry, statues, and other objects that have been dug out of the mounds that are
Sorry
Assyrian.
if I'm not adding anything to this. I mean, they're just stating facts, so it's like, okay, yes, the Sumerians were a thing.
And Babylon. But the true treasures of these kingdoms were their written records. Since the time of that discovery, we have believed that the first true civilization in all of humanity arose in Mesopotamian Sumer, located in present-day Iraq, around 6,000 years ago. This is now being challenged by the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, a far older site dating back nearly 11,000 years. However, this is a conversation we're going to save for a little later on. Now, Sumer translates to land of the civilized kings, and their culture exploded onto the scene virtually overnight, becoming the cradle of human civilization. Allow me a moment to be clear that while the general consensus is that Sumer is the oldest civilization, this is not to suggest that we don't see signs of civilization popping up in other places across the world in and around the same time period. And really, it all depends on how we want to define the word civilization. We see signs of agriculture across Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and even Mesoamerica, thousands of years prior to the rise of the Sumerian and adjacent civilizations. So the reason that we're focusing on the Sumerians today is because of the vast amount of information we have available about these people. And further, because most of their religious stories have played a rather substantial role in establishing some of the world's largest religions today. Going through our research has led us to find a wealth of connections between many of the ancient cultures of the world. So while our focus is primarily on the Sumerians, at least at first, we will also naturally branch out and explore other ancient civilizations throughout this presentation when they become relevant to the conversation. Looking into the artifacts of Sumer is quite interesting, as they host a long list of archaeological firsts for the human race. Among these finds are the first schools, the first historians, the first methods of writing, the first library, the first doctors and pharmacopoeia, the first agriculture and farmer's almanac, the first musical notation, the first bicameral legislature, and the first taxes. The Sumerian legal code, also a first, included protection for divorced women, as well as price controls on foodstuffs and wagon rentals. We also see the invention of the wheel, the chariot, the sailboat, and the plow.
I love how they're gonna start with like actual historical and archaeological facts, just to go full-blown fucking insane in a few minutes. Like, just let's just all watch for the moment where everything's gonna go tits up. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be a pretty drastic change. It's gonna be like, yeah, they developed agriculture and then boom, fucking laser guns and spaceships and shit.
Invented our standard measurement of time. The concept of 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour and the 12 to 24 hour clock all started with the Sumerians. They also developed the first astronomical and astrological systems, the first maps and cartography, and the first mathematics. Oh, they also seemed to have invented beer, with archaeologists finding a 3,900-year-old Sumerian poem honoring Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing, which also contains the oldest surviving beer recipe. Ultimately, you put all of this together and you get the first urban civilization in history. The most significant discovery out of all of this, however, was finding that their religion and belief system influenced all of those that followed, where even today we find the Sumerian creation epic filtered through the ages and into the Old Testament, making the Sumerian legends appear to be the source code of many of the world's religions today. One example of this can be found with the epics of Gilgamesh, Ziusudra, and Atrahasis, each of them ancient poetic stories essentially describing the flood of the Old Testament, yet transcribed long before Noah was ever written down. The cuneiform tablets of Sumer contain inscriptions of a tremendous magnitude, encompassing cosmological tales, epic poems, histories of kings, temple records, commercial contracts, marriage and divorce records, astronomical tables, astrological forecasts, mathematical formulas, geographic lists, grammar and vocabulary school texts, and not least of all, texts dealing with the names, genealogies, epithets, deeds, powers, and duties of the gods. Now, it's important to know that if we're discussing these Sumerian records, the truth is, there's a lot of different writings and tellings available from a number of generations in time. You had the Sumerians, the original civilization, which then spread and developed into the Akkadians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and eventually the Chaldeans. These tablets that we are referencing were generally written between 2700 and 1600 BCE, and it appears many were translated down or cultural retellings from older stories. Among all of the tablets of Sumer that have been dug up, there are a wide number of variations and tellings of these ancient stories, which describe the mythological deities who created the world and the people who live upon it. It can actually be very confusing to learn about these deities because there are a number of contradictions between the tellings due to how many cultures adopted the stories and fit them to their needs. Ancient History Encyclopedia writes, all of these seeming contradictions stem from Mesopotamia's long history and the different cultures which adopted.
I'm a little bit bored by this. I was expecting more epic fucking space opera madness and gods battling and whatnot. What the fuck is going on? I thought this was gonna be like crazy off the wall. It's just like a history lesson so far. So yeah, sorry. I hope it picks up later on.
The Sumerian gods and made them their own with additions and alterations to their stories. Sometimes these changes expand upon or continue older stories, but often different scribes in various eras simply rewrote the tales to suit their purposes. Now, in our recently published book, The Book of Spirit, we spend some time discussing the variations of what these ancient cultures could have meant by their description of the gods. Generally, they're interpreted in one of several ways. The most socially acceptable interpretation today is generally that these gods are forces of nature or aspects of life, like night and day, birth and death, or the sun and the moon. Often, there are also specific times when the Sumerians reference planets or constellations, such as Jupiter or Mercury, or even the Pleiades, which, for the record, was one of the most significant and worshipped star clusters across all of Sumer. However, and generally the least accepted theory in modern academia, is that these gods represented actual physical beings called the Anunnaki, supposedly from the planet Nibiru, who were far more technologically advanced than we were, and who were involved in the creation of the human race. This idea has become very popular since the story first came out in the 1970s, and especially in the last 10 years or so, thanks to the internet and a growing interest in these subjects. In order to identify if there's any substantiated evidence to these claims, we're going to begin by looking at the Sumerian creation epic.
I have a personal theory that Jimmy fell asleep to this shit once, or like one day, whatever, and it just imprinted into his brain. Simple as that. And now he's just rambling dumb shit about fucking aliens and spaceships and being gifted iPhones and whatnot. You know, human ingenuity, forget about it. Engineering, that's a myth, that's sorcery.
Now, this rendition of the story is very simple because we don't actually have a lot of information to work with. This is because many of the tablets were broken with time, and also since the stories changed across generations as we looked at before. But with that said, let's have a look and see what we can discover about what the Sumerians believed regarding the creation of everything as interpreted and pieced together by various historians and scholars throughout history. The Sumerian creation epic begins with the primordial mother goddess named Namu, who many suggest represents the creative force behind the entire universe itself.
What's up, Kim?
She was the goddess Sea who gives birth to the first actual gods. These are An and Ki, the sky and the earth, who are generally interpreted as being one being, An-Ki, though some interpretations say they began as two. At any rate, An and Ki, or An-Ki, give birth to a child named Enlil, the god of the air. Enlil cleaves An and Ki in two, implying they were singular, separating the heavens and the earth. Finally, Namu and An create Enki, who is the god of water, and also the god of wisdom, mischief, crafts, and creation. At this moment, I'd like to express there's some discrepancy regarding the order of this family tree. While Enlil is considered in most traditions to be the firstborn son of An, we also see versions where Enki is the firstborn. Ultimately, it doesn't affect the story too much, but I felt it was relevant to express that here. This pantheon then goes on to create a number of other gods and goddesses, such as Uttu and Nana, the sun and the moon, and Inanna, the great goddess of heaven and earth. Inanna is a particularly interesting character in these ancient stories, at one point becoming the most venerated deity in the Sumerian pantheon. One of her parables, The Descent of Inanna, is considered a 5,500-year-old literary masterpiece, and we'll come back around to this story later on in the Sumerian epic. Now, while there are a number of parables involving interactions between all of these deities, and so many more gods who we're not even going to mention today, a great deal of the Sumerian creation epic revolves around these three original characters, An, Enlil, and Enki, who sort of form their own holy trinity in a sense. In these stories, eventually Namu has an idea and speaks with Enki, having him create human beings to assist the gods in their work, and other, perhaps even more common tellings of the story.
I don't want to buzz the spirit science bubble, but in the spirit science bubble, but anyways, in the first movie, they started off with a fucking Egyptian god and like aliens and space and time traveling Hebrews. Like, now when we're into Sumerian mythology, like, how does that belief works? Like, what mythology is not included in this actually?
It was Enlil's idea, who told Namu about it, who then gave Enki the task. This, in essence, is the basic idea of the original Sumerian creation epic. Due to the passing along of stories over time, and that many tablets are damaged, a lot of the details of this creation story we looked at remains a mystery. Now, you might be thinking, gee, Patch, I'm not sure I see the parallel between what you just shared and the Bible. Are you sure that these are related? And the answer is absolutely. However, in order to see how we get from this to this, we have to look at the stories in the middle and see how this chain develops from here to here. The middle of the story between these two is found in the Babylonian creation epic, of which a far more complete telling exists today. In this story, it relates Namu with the mother goddess named Tiamat and Enlil with a being named Marduk. However, as you will soon see, there are significant differences in the way that these goddesses are portrayed in the literature. Things are about to get very interesting. The Babylonian epic of creation begins with the primordial god and goddess, Apsu and Tiamat. These two are described as the god of fresh water and the goddess of salt water, which is commonly interpreted to be not as physical water, but primordial substance in the early universe. However, Apsu is sometimes seen as the freshwater aquifers underneath Mesopotamia, and Tiamat being the saltwater sea. In the story, Apsu also has
fresh water has to be like, I don't know, maybe 10% of all the water we have on Earth. Not even, I don't know. Maybe. This shit makes no sense.
Zir, whose name is Mumu. Together,
up,
Apsu
Mumu?
and Tiamat mingle their waters, and they create two deities, Lamu and Lahamu. As they are growing, two more deities are created, Anshar and Kishar, who excelled beyond the first two. Anshar and Kishar form Anu, who is quite powerful himself, who then begets Ea.
It's all gonna be on the
Both
page.
Anu and Ea are the same beings as An and Enki from the previous story. All of these newly created children make a ton of noise and problems, surging back and forth and disturbing Tiamat's belly. Even Apsu believes their behavior is loathsome. Apsu declares that he's going to destroy these children and end their annoying ways. Tiamat says, "No, don't do that. Be patient with our children," and is very upset that Apsu wants to kill them. Mumu, on the other hand, is very supportive and encouraging of Apsu's plan. These children find out about Apsu's intent. With fear of imminent death, the children go to one of their own, the resourceful Ea, who performs some magic so that Apsu drops into an eternal sleep, subduing all of his power and effectively killing him. Ea then chains Mumu up as a prisoner and takes the throne of Apsu. He names
That's the
his
thing,
new king.
zombie, like, oh shit, I mean, Kim. Like, I'm a big fan of fucking fictional universes and, like, expanded lores and whatnot, but, like, this shit, everything seems to happen. Everything's connected, everything applies. All mythologies apply. There's aliens, there's 11th dimension beings, there's fucking time-traveling Jews, there's invading low-level ghosts, there's energy vortexes, bro. Like, where does it stop?
Chamber after Apsu, and it is here that he and his wife Damkina, who is often related with Ki from the original Sumerian story, give birth to a new god called Marduk. Marduk is a very interesting character, for it says that he was very manly, with remarkable divinity. It also says that he had 4 eyes and 4 ears, and that he breathed fire when he moved his lips.
Howdy.
Anu gives Marduk something called the 4 winds as
Ew,
well,
that
and by
sounded
the
like a
power of the
game
4
motion.
winds, a wave of intention
Howdy.
is sent towards Tiamat to cause her upset and frustration. Soon after this, Tiamat is told by the gods that when her husband was slain, she did nothing, and now she too will be punished. The result of this is
Yeah, Kim. It's like, not only do they ruin the present, but they time travel to fuck up the past. Go figure.
that Tiamat summons a small army of 11 monsters and dragons around her, who all had very curious names. There was Venomous Snake, the Big Weathered Beast, Exalted Serpent, Furious Snake, the Hairy One, Great Dragon, Mad Lion, Scorpion Man, Violent Storms, Fish Man,
Man.
and Bull Man. In addition to these 11,
there's
there was
Pokemons
also her
in there.
consort Kingu, who becomes the lead general of her army. Tiamat gives him something called the Tablet of Destinies, which is an object that confers upon the bearer the supreme authority as the ruler of the universe. Kingu advises that she destroy her children, who seem to be clearly plotting against her. And in her sorrow for the loss of her husband and anger towards her children, she then becomes the antagonist in the story. In many interpretations of the tablets, Tiamat herself transforms into a great sea dragon.
Here
Ea
we
speaks with
go.
Anshar and asks for advice. And Anshar basically says, Ea, you started
Dragon
it.
time,
You killed her
nigga.
husband and you made her really mad. Take responsibility for your actions. Talk to her. Try to help her calm down. Ea responds by explaining that he didn't feel like he had much of a choice because all of them would be destroyed otherwise. But he takes Anshar's advice. Ea then attempts to speak with Tiamat, but retreats quickly, for her strength is too mighty and she is filled with dread, unable to hear Ea's plea. Anshar then sends Anu to do the same. Anu does what his father asks, but finds
this
Tiamat's
all
magic
going?
too much for him and retreats as well. It is soon realized that only one person can save the day, and so Ea summons Marduk to his chambers and asks him to go and see Anshar. When Marduk sees Anshar, Marduk understands
damn it.
what is needed of him and agrees to put an end to Tiamat's rampage. But in exchange, he asks that he be named the King of the Gods when it is done. Anshar sends his vizier, whose name is Gaga, off to inform Lamu and Lahamu of this development, who summon a council of gods,
Ah, yes, of
and over
course,
beer
Lamu
and
and
pastries they
Lahamu.
discuss and agree to Marduk's request. And so Marduk prepares for war. Marduk arms himself with a number of weapons, a net, a bow with some arrows, a club, and in addition to his 4 winds, also creates 3 more: the evil wind, the dust storm, and the tempest. He also brings with him the storm flood, his mightiest weapon, and he rode a chariot of irresistible storm, which were pulled by 4 steeds: the destroyer, the merciless, the trampler, and the fleet. As he approached Tiamat, Marduk observed Kingu and his shining tablet of destinies. As Marduk looked, his determination fell, and he faltered. Many of his divine aides who were marching at his side
Well, I gotta
saw
admit, it's more entertaining than Christianity, but wow.
the warrior, and their vision went dim. How could they even stand a chance? Summoning his courage, Marduk hurls the storm flood at Tiamat and yells something to the effect of,
Tiamat, why are you aggressive and arrogant?
and strive to provoke battle. Against all of the gods you have stirred up and established trouble. Deploy your troops, secure your weapons. You and I will take our stand and do battle. When Tiamat heard this, she went insane. A great celestial battle commenced. When Marduk gets close enough to Tiamat, he first traps her in his net. Then, he shoots the evil wind at her face, who opens her mouth to swallow it, but she is unable to, and it holds her mouth open. He then shoots an arrow into her belly, which cuts through her insides and extinguishes her life. Marduk then binds up her small army, who are now cowering in fear, and retrieves the Tablet of Destinies from Kingu. Then, he returns to Tiamat, and with his merciless club, crushes her head, and then cuts her in two. Half of her body is used to create the earth, and the other half is used to create the heavens.
That makes total sense.
Following this, Marduk is crowned the king of the gods.
Fuck science.
He positions
The
600
Sumerians
gods
had
on
it
the earth
right all
and
along.
300 in the heavens. And the city of Babylon is created in his honor, and the other gods praise him. Marduk conceives a desire to accomplish clever things, and he announces that using divine blood, he will create a new being called man, who will continue the work of the gods so that they may all rest and be peaceful. Ea proposes that one of
So
Tiamat's
we're
defeated
basically living on the corpse of a giant female dragon. Sorry.
warrior gods be used for the blood, and so Marduk asks the gods who caused Tiamat to rebel and instigate warfare. The gods respond that it was Kingu, and so they bring him forth, bound it up, and slay him. Kingu's blood is then mixed with clay from the earth, and with this mixture, Ea and his wife, the birth goddess, created humans.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say this
Ea
is
doesn't
pretty
want to make them
satanic,
exactly as
actually.
the gods, but gives them many abilities and traits, but withholds immortality. On them, Marduk imposes labor, commanding that they serve the gods by their work in the fields and cities, and provide offerings and worship regularly. Our story comes to a grand finale and ends with Marduk being given 50 names by which he can be worshipped, and reminding people that against Marduk, no one else can face him, for he is the supreme ruler of the universe.
Well, Marduk's a badass.
Now, the story we just looked at is written down in exceptional detail in a series of tablets called the Enuma Elish, of which several main translations are available online, for anyone out there who is curious to read them. The story begins in a very similar way to the Sumerian edition that we discussed prior, with Namu. However, the Enuma Elish expands upon it further, taking the story into one of a terrifying battle and the rise of a new, very strong masculine power. Throughout history, this story gained prominence in Babylon, and as we heard in the story itself, is used to explain how Babylon came to be. Eventually, this story even influenced the creation of the Bible. Now, you might be thinking, hold up, there is no way that there's this epic battle in the Bible. However, in Psalms 74, in the midst of God ordering the sea and the dry land, establishing the sun, the moon, the stars, and the seasons, he's also destroying sea monsters. Yet God, my king, is from old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of the Leviathan, and you gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. Dun-na. Sure enough, fighting sea dragons, right there in the Bible. We can also see a rather curious correlation to the Bible.
Isn't the
by
term Leviathan debated by scholars? Like, I've always heard that it wasn't like a clear definition. If it was like, I don't know, a representation of Satan, another demon, or just like a very big animal. Yeah, I don't know, just I wanted to throw that out there. I don't think it was ever defined as like sea monster, like definite sea monster.
fact that Marduk is given 50 holy names, many of which follow a similar naming convention by the names of God found in the Bible. For example, where in Hebrew it goes Yahweh, and then Yahweh Jireh, Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh Nisi, and so on, Marduk's 50 names also give him a title, and then continue to expand upon it several times before repeating this pattern with another title, such as Tutu, Tutuziokina, Tutuziku, Tutuagaku, and so on. Ultimately, the question remains, what does it all mean? And what does it have to do with us? Why do we care? Now, previously we looked at the various possible interpretations of the title gods as either planets, people, or forces of nature. When looking into the ancient Sumerian and Babylonian records, the honest truth is that today, we don't really understand exactly what they were referring to, although there are some popular theories about it. To most in the academic world, this story is an allegory for the formation of the universe from the primordial substance of creation. It is seen as a triumph of order over chaos and light over darkness. It has been observed as a parable of the rise of Babylon and Babylonian culture over the older Sumerian model of civilization. Further, this tale can be understood as an illustration of the concept of life as perpetual change. In this myth, the old static gods in the story are replaced by the younger, more dynamic gods who then introduced the concept of change and mutability to the universe through the creation of mortal beings who are subject to death. These creatures are tasked with helping the gods maintain their creation, and so, although they themselves are not eternal, they play an integral role in the work of the gods. Other scholars who interpret these stories in a more
we're essentially their slaves. What kind of integral role would that be?
metaphorical way suggests that the great celestial battle is actually explaining original sin in a different form than we're familiar with, because humans are created from the blood of the slain Kingu, who was the chief warrior for Tiamat, representing primordial chaos and a force of powerful evil. Because of this, humans have the capacity for evil, and this story was one of the ways that early humanity made sense of this. And personally, we also see a huge correlation between this story and the Kabbalistic tree of life. In the beginning, there was Apsu and Tiamat, who, if we correlate the stories together, emerged from Namu. Then we have the creation of 6 deities in pairs of 2, which creates these paired opposites along the left and right side of the tree.
Oh shit, it's the symbol. I remember that. That's from the Atlantis, what the fuck? What the fuck was it? The 10 vortexes. Yeah! The 10 vortexes, bro. I remember that. I was drunk and I'm still drunk, but I remember that.
Bringing us to the bottom. In the resulting struggle for the rulership and harmonization of the entire tree, or the totality of creation, Marduk wins, creating the center of Tiferet. Further, there are a number of other ways we could position these characters in relationship to the tree, such as putting Apsu at the top and Tiamat at the bottom, since she is the earth after all,
makes sense.
and all
if
of the other gods being created between them. This is of course just a curious musing of ours, but a very interesting correlation nonetheless. Now, this may very well be the end of the story, that these ancient myths are steeped in metaphors and ideas which reflect human consciousness. And that's that. However, in the last 50 years or so, a different idea about what the story meant came to light. This new telling suggested that, in fact, the story was a bit of a secret code, a story with clues alluding to something that really happened in history. This story has planetary collisions, alien spacemen, and so much more.
Yes.
When this telling came out, it became one of the first times that the world truly took an interest in these tablets. And this story only came about because a young boy became obsessed with a burning question. In the early 1920s, a young boy named Zechariah Sitchin found himself in school listening to his teacher.
All right, I'm gonna keep you guys onto this cliffhanger. Just need to take a little 2-3 minutes. I gotta go do a little quick splish splash, and we'll be right back. Alright, ends are washed. We're back.
Actual physical events that took place
Oh
in
my
our
God,
history,
did we miss
but a
something?
very interesting correlation nonetheless.
Here we go.
Now, this may very well be the end of the story, that these
No, we were at this goober. Come on. Did I break something?
Genesis 6
Bruh.
that he heard his teacher say, "There were giants on the earth in those days." To which Zechariah raised his hand and asked, why do you say giants?
There goes another
The
beer.
older Hebrew says Nephilim. Who are the Nephilim? His teacher replied, "Sit down, Zechariah. You do not question the Bible." And so it began. Who are the Nephilim? Became this burning, obsessive question in the mind of this young, inspired boy. Following
What
his
are the
experience with his
Nephilims,
teacher,
yo?
Zechariah realized that he had full faith in the Bible all along. What he was questioning
Terrible
was the
mistake.
translation of the Bible and the individual interpretations of that translation. Not being able to ask his teachers for help, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Growing up, he searched for answers and soon learned about the discovery of the Sumerian tablets. It was here that Zechariah found the origins of the Old Testament, along with a large volume of supporting works that had never made it into the official release of the Bible. He realized in order to understand the answer to this question of the Nephilim, he would have to learn Sumerian cuneiform. This began Zechariah's lifelong journey of dedication to reading and deciphering the meaning within the texts and the answer to the question, who are the Nephilim? In 1976,
Bro, if it
Sitchin
goes
released
into
his
Giants territory, I'm gonna gush. Literally gush.
first book, The 12th Planet, which shocked the world with what he had found in his years with the tablets and began bringing people together around a new idea of Earth's history. By 1998, he had completed the Earth Chronicles with The Cosmic Code and then released numerous other books all the way up to his passing away in 2010.
Oh my God.
To him, he was overcome with an interpretation of the tablets that he believed was attempting to explain a series of actual physical events that took place in our history and explain the reason that things are the way they are in our solar system and on our planet today. Of course, many critics have put forth that Sitchin, while he may have laid a lot of groundwork here for the discussion of the tablets, also added and embellished the story quite a bit with his own theories and ideas, sometimes drawing conclusions that others were not able to find written in the ancient tablets. Nevertheless, following Sitchin's interpretations, we find several
you might have-
remarkable correlations both with
Dude just goes like, oh, well, he was accused of embellishing the stories a little bit. Nevertheless, let's just put that aside. I mean, it might have been all fiction, or at least a good 97% fiction, but nevertheless.
in our solar system, on our planet, and even in our very own DNA, which simply cannot be ignored. As always, please have your own experience as we go through this story. Even if you don't believe this to be
just
historical
make up
fact,
your own mind.
you may enjoy it for the fascinating tale that it is. Now, let us explore one
It
of the
might
most
all be
unique
bullshit, but,
interpretations
you know.
of this great celestial battle, and truly see if it stands up to scientific scrutiny today. In order to discuss this theory, we begin by exploring how a solar system is formed. There's still a lot of mysteries in science as to how solar systems come to be, and today there are two primary models we're going to look at. The first that we'll be going over is the current standard model, which is the general consensus in most scientific circles today. After that, we'll be looking at the electric universe theory, which puts forth a different interpretation about how solar systems form, and a very interesting one at that. Starting with the standard model, today it's believed that a star is born in the vastness of the arms of a galaxy, when a large collection of cosmic dust and gas becomes compressed by gravity into a singular point. Made of increasingly compressed dust and gas, it begins to emit a massive amount of light and heat and ends up creating a large disk spiraling all around it. Deep inside the cloudy disk, clumps of dust are flash heated into droplets of molten rock, the building blocks of the solar system. As they spiral around the forming star, these clumps of matter begin to merge together and grow into larger and larger bodies, which form the basis of...
Again, this is science, so, you know, there's not much to laugh at or add commentary to. He's just stating facts. Seems to be his MO, basically. Starts with, like, scientifical facts, and then it goes straight up fucking off the rails. So, you know, I guess we have a good 10 minutes of good old regular shit before it goes straight up to alien battles and whatnot.
Asteroids and planets. Sometime during this development, the protostar undergoes fusion and ignites itself into a baby star, which emits a tremendous amount of something called solar wind, blasting away the dusty cloud, leaving behind only the solid and denser matter, which continues to merge and form together into planets until they become the celestial bodies of a solar system. One curious thing we should mention is that there is a great mystery about how our watery planet got here, because in the early formation of the solar system, it is believed it would be too hot for water to not evaporate and get blasted out with the dust by the solar wind. One of the leading theories about how we could have got all of this water is by flying space rocks called carbonaceous chondrites, which can carry water on them and crash down to the planet. This, however, still leaves many questions for us to answer, because if this is the case, why don't we see the same amount of water anywhere else in the solar system? Except, of course, in the asteroid belt. At any rate, the reason why this conversation is important is because in Sitchin's theory of the Sumerian tablets, the story begins in the very early days of our solar system. The opening lines of the Enuma Elish begin, "When the heavens above did not exist, and earth beneath had not come into being, there was Apsu, the first in order, their begetter." Most commonly, Apsu is interpreted by scholars as the god of fresh water, believing him to relate with underwater aquifers under the surface of Mesopotamia. Sitchin, on the other hand, believed this line to be describing the sun, the first in order, begetter of them all. Mumu, Apsu's vizier, was Mercury, a small body of matter orbiting very close to the bright star. And of course, there was a beautiful goddess called Tiamat, the glistening one, the of life, which was the planet that eventually became the Earth. However, in the beginning, it was not the same as we know our Earth to be today. Tiamat was a particularly special planet, for it was entirely covered with water, the only planet like it in the solar system. It was also quite a bit larger than the Earth is today, approximately the size of Neptune, and it had a different orbit as well. It was a little bit further from the Sun, in an orbit that we would locate where the asteroid belt is today, between Mars and Jupiter.
What the fuck?
Regarding the formation of Tiamat, observations of interstellar clouds and other basic sciences show that hydrogen and oxygen, the building blocks of water, are some of the most abundant elements in the universe. And so it would make sense that as the solar system was forming, there was likely tons of water ice, or at least hydrogen and oxygen, that was getting pulled in from all directions, colliding together and forming into what was likely a rather large field of water ice and other debris, which may have even been partially liquid, solid, and gaseous all at the same time, spinning around in a fury of deadly winds and storm. In a document titled "Origin of Water Ice in the Solar System," a scientist of the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory explains that the origin of water ice...
Did he say that the ice, water, and gases, like all forms of what we call water, would have been in the same contained space? Like, how the fuck would that make any sense? Like, if the form is dictated by other factors and those factors are dependent on quantum physics, and we live in a quantic universe. Holy shit. Okay, I'm overthinking that, sorry.
During planetary formation comes from at least two sources. It condenses beyond a certain distance from the proto-sun, no more than 5 astronomical units, but perhaps as close as 2, and it falls in from the surrounding molecular cloud. This is especially interesting to us as it relates with our theory, because the asteroid belt is 2.2 to 3.2 AU away from the sun, which is where Tiamat was said to be, according to this story. This will also make more sense by the time we conclude our exploration of this theory. Returning to the Babylonian epic, Sitchin goes on to explain that the formation of the following 6 deities, in pairs of 2, describe the formation of the other planets in our solar system out of the early debris that spiraled around the sun. The first, for example, Lamu and Lahamu, are believed to describe Mars and Venus. Curiously, the names Lamu and Lahamu etymologically derive from the Sumerian word for war. Sitchin explains that the Mesopotamians knew Mars to be the god of war, and Venus was the god of love and war. And so the concept that Lamu and Lahamu were Mars and Venus fit both mythologically and etymologically. Then Kishar and Anshar form, who are said to surpass or excel beyond Lamu and Lahamu. These were, of course, Jupiter and Saturn. The Babylonians make a special note to describe that Anshar had a firstborn emissary or vizier named Gaga, which is believed to be a particular moon of Saturn, which would one day become Pluto. And we'll look at how that happens momentarily. After that, we have our final 2 deities coming into being, Anu and Ea. Anu is said to represent Uranus, and Ea, Neptune. These 2 are also known by other names, An and Enki, from the...
None of this is based on anything. What the fuck? I'd have to check, like I'm kind of retarded and not up to date on my, study of planets or whatnot, but I have serious doubts that Neptune was a fucking moon of Jupiter. What? Oh, this is kind of giving me a headache right now.
Original Sumerian telling of the story. I find it extremely curious that Neptune is also a name for the god of the sea in Roman mythology, synonymous with the Greek Poseidon. It's curious because Ea, or Enki in Mesopotamia, was firstly called the god of water. It's also curious that the planet Neptune wasn't actually even discovered until 1846. Now, the way that Sitchin interpreted this story is that in those early days of the solar system, the orbits of the planets were not established or harmonious yet. As the tablets tell us, they surged back and forth and disturbed Tiamat's belly. Sitchin writes, the newly created family of planets was far from being stable. The planets were gravitating towards each other. They were converging on Tiamat, disturbing and endangering the primordial bodies. We have here obvious references to erratic orbits. The new planets surged back and forth. They got close to each other. They interfered with Tiamat's orbit. While it was Tiamat that was principally endangered, Apsu too found the planet's ways loathsome. The tablets describe that Apsu, caring for Tiamat, expresses the idea of destroying the children. This part is curious when relating it with planets. Perhaps it refers to the young star emitting blasts of radiation, which could potentially destroy these young planets completely, or at least send them flying off into space. During this part of the story, and what follows next with the death of Apsu, Sitchin theorized several ideas, with the basic premise being that something, whether relating with Ea, the planet Neptune emitting waves of radiation, or even just time itself, caused the sun to settle its turbulent energy. Nevertheless, it's interesting that after this point, Apsu is no longer referred to as a deity, but rather a location. Ea is said to claim Apsu's throne, and as he lay in his quarters, he names them Apsu. This act in the story could be referring to the sun's radiation and cosmic wind, which had now finally settled. It's not entirely clear, but generally the interpretations of this scene describe a shift in the early solar system, where now any new planets to come into the system had to come from the outside, of which Neptune was sort of like a gatekeeper for, being at the outermost edge of the solar system. Therefore, Ea took over the role of Apsu.
Well, theoretically, wasn't Pluto at the edge of the solar system until we decided it wasn't a planet because it's too small and something having to do with its orbit being not regular or something? What the fuck is this guy talking about?
As far as the story goes, this is where we see the older deities beginning to be taken over by the younger ones. And that's exactly what happens. Because shortly after this, Ea gives birth to Marduk, and Tiamat grows angry towards her children. Marduk, as you might have guessed, was interpreted to be a new planet that entered into our solar system from the outside. To avoid confusion, let me briefly mention that in Sitchin's interpretations, Marduk, especially when referring to it as a planet, is commonly known by the name Nibiru, which has become a rather popular name in recent years for a supposed missing planet, which is said to exist in the far reaches of our solar system. However, the word Nibiru in the ancient tablets is written about in a number of ways. It's a word used to sometimes describe a planet, usually Jupiter and one time Mercury. It's used to describe a god, specifically Marduk, which could be a planet. It's also used to describe a star in the sky, specifically Marduk's star. In Babylonian astronomy, Nibiru also seems to refer to the equinox and the astronomical objects associated with it. Finally, Nibiru is referred to as a location, a place in which the gods, who are called the Anunnaki, come from. It's for this reason that scholars of cuneiform astronomy have not been able to determine with certainty what Nibiru is. But it's because of Sitchin's work that Nibiru is often regarded as a name for this additional planet that's in our outer solar system, of which Marduk is seemingly a more appropriate name. Then again, there are interpretations out there that account for both Marduk and Nibiru as their own individual characters or things. But interpretations get very complex when we go there. So for now, let's return to our story. As we've discussed, Marduk was said to be born of Ea and his wife Damkina, who is sometimes referred to as a great queen or goddess of nature. This is another confusing part of the Babylonian epic, because nowhere in the Enuma Elish—
It's okay, Kim, I think we all are. None of this shit makes any fucking sense. Like I said, it started out with 11th dimension beings, Atlantis, the fucking, what was that? Lemuria, time traveling Jews and Martians and 14-year-old girls, brains. Bro. And we all have an artificial Merkaba that we can use to time travel through astral projection. And now it's Sumerian gods, because, you know, fuck us all, I guess. I don't know.
Does it describe where she comes from? She's just kind of there, but you do get more of an origin story when referencing other tablets from ancient Mesopotamia. If we're looking at the story from the planetary perspective, it's very possible that she could be representing the vacuum of space, and that Marduk was pulled through the womb of space by the gravity of our solar system, and entered into our system passing by Neptune, essentially becoming Ea's son. Sitchin proposed that, based on what was written about Marduk, that it was a large planet approximately the size of Neptune that entered into our solar system in the opposite direction compared to the other planets. He said that it had a long elliptical orbit, going way out into the far reaches of our solar system, and returned back in a time frame of approximately 3,600 years. When this planet passed through, it was always a great event in the solar system, as it affected the gravity of the other planets, causing earthquakes and tidal waves. Then it would go way out, past the distant planets, and disappear from sight. Some theories suggest that this planet could have come to our solar system in the first place when its own local star exploded, and it careened off into space on its own. Nevertheless, Sitchin believed that Marduk must have been a very young planet, for the tablets said that he was belching fire, which could have been a sign of tremendous volcanic activity and radiation. The drama of this great celestial battle begins when Marduk first entered into our solar system.
Yo, I just realized, like, even if all of that shit was true and Marduk represented a planet, blah, 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 and then the explosion, and then it drifted off into space. It's a dead planet. Who gives a fuck? There's not... Even if somehow it was true, like, am I retarded? Like, what the fuck? Like, it doesn't matter. It's just a piece of rock just floating into space. Like, it didn't contain life, and it couldn't contain life, so... Where are we going? Where are we going with this?
And as it passed by Uranus, something intense happens. The tablets write, Anu formed and gave birth to the four winds.
Just passed by
He delivered
Uranus.
them to Marduk, my son, let them whirl. These lines were interpreted as depicting several large chunks of planet matter beginning to tear away from Uranus's body and pulled towards the passing Marduk, which resulted in the formation of 4 satellites. These were the 4 winds, which were thrust into a fast orbit around the planet, swirling as a whirlwind. This would have been the theorized event causing numerous anomalies with Uranus, including its sideways tilt and warped magnetic field. Continuing to move into our solar system, the planet was soon seized by the tremendous gravitational forces of Saturn and Jupiter, and its path was bent inwards towards the center of our solar system, and Tiamat. In the story, when Marduk comes to visit Anshar, who is supposedly Saturn, Anshar sends his vizier Gaga off to see Lamu and Lahamu, Mars and Venus. This, Sitchin believed, was that Marduk's gravity pulled one of Saturn's small moons away from it, loosening its orbit, and sent it off into space past Venus and Mars, eventually establishing a rather curious orbit of its own, which today we know as Pluto. It's possible that along its path, Marduk may also have influenced the creation of Chiron, the small planetoid between Saturn and Uranus. As it drew closer, Marduk's gravity soon began to disturb all of the inner planets, most of all Tiamat, whose water and rocks began to break apart and tear from her body, creating 11 satellites that spiraled around the planet as if acting as a shield. These were the 11 dragons and monsters that Tiamat summoned in the story. Sitchin wrote that the tablets described Marduk and Tiamat to have been crowned with halos, giving the appearance of gods. Of particular importance in the Mesopotamian cosmogony was the largest of Tiamat's satellites, Kingu, the firstborn among the gods who formed her assembly. It is significant because as Marduk approached, Kingu was pulled closer to Marduk and away from Tiamat's orbit. Sitchin believed that Kingu being pulled away like this was Tiamat giving Kingu the Tablet of Destinies. In this interpretation, the tablet itself was actually a planetary orbit of its own, of which Kingu almost adopted. Nevertheless, soon Marduk was set on an unalterable collision course with Tiamat. Tiamat and Marduk, the wisest of the gods, advanced against one another.
Tactical
They pressed on
satellites.
to single combat. They approached for battle.
All the planets are going to be
When
like,
it passed
who's the
by,
sexy?
it was not Marduk itself, but one
Gothic
of the swirling
planet.
winds around it that crashed into Tiamat
Okay.
and severed
Sorry,
a
I'm
phenomenal chunk, splicing her in half. All of Tiamat's satellites, with the exception of Kingu, were instantly shattered, and their remains continued to spiral around the sun in Tiamat's orbit. Her body became distended. Her mouth had opened wide. He shot there through an arrow. It tore her belly. It cut through her insides, tore into her womb. Having thus subdued her, her life breath he extinguished. Tiamat was left fissured and lifeless, but her fate had future encounters between the two planets in store. Marduk went sailing off into space, yet now gravitationally bound to return to the scene of this event. It was on the second pass through our solar system that Marduk's satellites once again crashed into Tiamat's remains, cleaving her in two. This heavy blow sent one massive
Hell yeah.
chunk, destined to
'Cause
become the Earth,
fuck that.
into an orbit where no planet had been orbiting before. The fragments of Tiamat that were shattered formed what we now call the asteroid belt, which the Sumerian tablets called the hammered bracelet. With the passage of time and a lot of extreme tectonic activity, the remains of Tiamat eventually returned to a spherical shape, this time with more land on its surface than it had before. Kingu, which hovered in the region of Tiamat since their first encounter with Marduk, followed Tiamat to her new location between Mars and Venus and became the moon. Marduk once again shot out into space and continued to orbit around the sun from a long distance away. This, according to Sitchin's interpretations of the tablets, is how the Earth got to be where it is today. What we've covered here was closer to the original interpretation from Sitchin's first book, The 12th Planet, and both Sitchin and a wide array of other authors have discussed and played with variations of the story. For example, there is a version where the smashed Tiamat had to be repaired and realigned by the beings called the Anunnaki, and reseed the planet with life afterwards. Ultimately, today what we've covered is the basic story and encourage everyone to explore this as you see fit. Now, the reason that Marduk or Nibiru was called the 12th planet was because to Sitchin's understanding of the ancient Sumerians, they observed the moon and the sun as planets when counting them all, which, in addition to Pluto, gives us 11, and Marduk then is the 12th. Further, we would be remiss if we didn't share that this is contested by skeptics, who put forth that the Sumerians didn't actually know of any planets beyond the ones that are visible. This would then imply that the story was not one about planets, end of story. However, one possible explanation for this is that if the stories historically are true, and that the legend was handed down to the Sumerians and Babylonians by another species beyond our own, then they could have encoded the story of the origin of our solar system inside the myth of Tiamat and Marduk, even if these ancient people didn't fully understand what the story was truly saying. We'll revisit this idea as we continue on, for this is only the beginning of our exploration with these tablets. After this, we get to hear the story of the creation of humanity on the newly created Earth. But before we go further into that, let's investigate this whole planet Marduk thing further. The topic of Marduk or Nibiru is not a new one and has received attention and thought from around the world over and over since Sitchin's first book came out in the 1970s. There are also plenty of conspiracy theories on the internet that respond to these ideas, and not to mention, it's received a fair share of debunkings as well. Remarkably, Sitchin's version of the story does a fairly decent job at explaining a number of anomalies in our solar system, such as the formation of the asteroid belt and why there's so much water in it, the tilt of Uranus and its warped magnetic field. It also describes how the moon was formed and Pluto's crazy orbit, among other things.
Okay.
Of course, the theory is not without...
This is as much as I can take. That was fun, but yo, my brain hurts from all the retarded shit I've heard right now. I can't. There's a good 35 minutes left to this video. I think I'm gonna do a two-parter because this is just too much for me. I don't think a break's gonna do it. I think I'm gonna cut it here, guys. That was fun. Thank you for hanging out. I'm definitely down to finish that video and make some more. I'd like to tackle down more cults. I know there's other videos out there. There's Mormon animations. There's Jehovah's Witnesses animations. There's some fucking Japanese Omrikyo animations, and I forgot the name of that shit. The smiling skull, the smiling cult. Anyways, plenty of that shit to watch, and I'm totally down for it. So thanks for hanging out, and I guess I'll see you guys later. Peace.